And it's that time of the week, everybody. It's Friday, and you know what Friday means?
It means TLF,
Oh,
the love for
it.
Flame always, and the tier list Fridays, because you know we have to do it. And listen, we haven't touched on raids tier list for like, I think
for
4 months
now.
or 5 months. So it's about that time we go into the melee DPS in the raid. Who the fuck plays the raid anymore? I know we do.
I mean,
a lot of people do.
A lot of people do, but you know what? A lot of people should do as well. They need to check our MO Cast channel.
Yeah.
I mean, you know, we've been doing podcasts for a while, and we have all sorts of podcasts from content creators. More recently, theory crafters, and we actually have a series that we've started a couple of weeks ago.
Breaking World of Warcraft.
World of Warcraft, exactly, where we actually address the topics of the game that could be improved, like approach from players, casual or hardcore. There's topics about systems, external power, class design, raid design, and stuff like that. And you can check it out in our MO Cast channel. The link is down below, obviously with the subscribe button, likes, and all of that, of course, after you watch this video.
I mean, if you ever wanted a World of Warcraft podcast on basically anything that works and doesn't work in WoW, check the link in the description. Of course, as Flame said, you watch this video first and after you go there.
Because, I mean, let's be honest, we need to check out where the Arms Warriors placed.
Hell
oh my
yeah.
god. Okay, so we've been on this for some time because we haven't looked at the raid, and it's kind of weird right now. Okay, you guys gotta take this with a little bit of grain of salt, because right now everybody has their best possible gear. Everybody can just swap covenants in between bosses, so it's different right now than what was live at the progression, and that's kind of what matters.
We remember Arms Warrior being like
Arms Warrior was like kicking it, and although Arms is still really good, and obviously Arms was one of the prime melee that you could take to Sanctum. Right now it's kind of around an A tier.
Oh yeah, I mean it's still very, very good. Don't get us wrong, but as Flame mentioned, this has to be taken with the biggest grain of salt, because everybody is decked to their teeth right now, and at this point in the 95 percentile parse range, when we're looking at all of the data, everybody can play their ass off. Okay, so it's all about, I would say, the maximum spec can do. Okay,
it's around 8% and 8% A tier. And I do have to like also make this disclaimer. We kind of looked at the top echelon of players, like the best of the best that got the most out of the spec. Obviously, some people, if you look at logs, will get a bunch of buffs, and that's all fair and dandy, but we have to kind of trade off here and there, and we decided to go for skill, even if the skill comes at the risk of it being buffed by 10,000 power infusions and blessing of whatever Paladin has for Night Fae, and God
we'll take the cheese in, okay, because it's inevitable. At this point in the game, it is inevitable. Okay, let's go to Assassination Rogue, which...
And this is surprising. Okay, so disclaimer, Assassination right now is the best, unequivocally, best melee spec in the raid
overall,
right now.
yes.
And I think the biggest part of it, and you can confirm or deny it, is the Frost tier set as well. Because that's actually what pumps a lot of assassination damage, and the fact that you're so late with like the maximum amount of crit you could possibly have makes that set even better. And you can look at parses from all different types of people. You can look at sub creation. You can look at just general logs. Assassination is kind of #1 in all of those unequivocally. It's doing really good, and that's actually pretty cool.
Yeah, this is the thing, right? We kind of known from like the I would say the half of the progression once like War first ended and stuff. We're kind of expecting Assassination Rogues to go with the Dashing Scoundrel Legendary and the Frost set, you know, having all of those big creative rules going further and further. And at this point in the game, it's a no-brainer, right? It's basically an S tier spec in all of the raids. It usually was like, I would say, very good in general, but Subtlety usually would have taken the cake on fights like Guardian, for example, and stuff like that. Not anymore, apparently, and we'll get to that in a second. But Assassination, I mean, it's a fun spec, especially if you like you have fights where you have to like not pad. Did I say pad? I don't want to say pad. We have to cleave. It does a way better job on cleaving than Sub does. I mean, Outlaw, you know, is the cleave king. Don't get me started on that. But it's very interesting to me that it is S tier. I mean, it definitely went up there.
Not only is S tier, it is well, spoiler alert, the best so far.
The best spec overall. But okay, let's go into the exact opposite.
The exact opposite. This is very sad, and we hope that a 9.2 this will change. But Enhancement is D tier. It's performance.
Is it? No.
The thing is, the performance of Enhancement kind of always bounces up and down. Obviously, the Wind Fury buff was good on progression for a lot of Arms Warrior, and if it wasn't for the Wind Fury buff, you might have not have seen any enhancement whatsoever in the progression, or at least in the world first race. Enhancement is still good. It does decent damage, and our certain bosses is like middle of the curve, so it's not that bad. above a lot of the specs in the game. But in terms of melee overall in Sanctum, played by the best of the best, Enhancement unfortunately is D tier, and we'll see if it remains the same in 9.2 because Enhancement is getting some love.
This is the thing. I don't know if we said this. We are talking about Mythic Sanctum of Domination and 95 percentile plus, okay, on parses. So in this range, Enhancement is a D tier.
This is where the differences between specs become more apparent.
Much more relevant. Okay, next on the list, one of my all-time favorites, Feral Druid, which isn't that bad, wasn't doing as bad. Again, one of those specs that can really do good on pure single target. Again, bosses like Guardian of the first ones, and can, in terms of like, I don't know, the 9 maybe, or even Kill 2 Zod and stuff like that, not the greatest, but this is one of the specs that, together with other ones we'll get to shortly, they did really good in terms of like progression to this point when it was like the pure single target fights. Now, in terms of like Sylvanas, I didn't see Feral doing that great over there. Although, if you would talk about phase 3, where it's basically a burn phase, a Feral should be doing really good over there.
So right now, Feral is kind of middle of the pack, B tier-ish.
Very respectable B tier. And again, this is nothing to sneeze at. Okay, I mean, if you play Feral, let's say, and you are still progressing, you know, in your casual mythic raid or whatever, it's fine. And we have a Feral in our guild that is pretty good. So that's all good and dandy. And similar to
Feral, we have actually
Frost Decay, yes,
which is also B tier, middle of the curve. It
actually better than Feral,
smidge above Feral, and it could probably be about the utility as well, because Blood Decay, I mean, I know that if you're going to farm bosses right now on Mythic, if like top guilds that are getting the best percentiles are farming the bosses right now, their tank of choice might actually be something like a Prot Paladin, you know? So if that would be the case, and if you wouldn't have a Blood Decay as your main tank, then the next choice would probably be something like Frost Decay to bring AMZ, if that's even necessary, because that could save healers some time. Maybe you can get your healers to deal damage, and obviously you don't need that during progression. Healers were not just gonna do damage, but the fact that Frost Decay does have some utility that can help the raid is indicative of how good the spec can be. In terms of damage, it's weird because obviously you have to match the Breath of Sindragosa timing with all the mechanics, because it's like a 2-minute cooldown, and you want to maintain it as much as possible for about at least a minute in the higher echelon of skill, and that can get particularly difficult, especially if you look at lower levels of players. Breath of Sindragosa maintenance becomes harder and harder, and obviously that applies to everybody. I have a lot of trouble maintaining high Breath of Sindragosa, but with the Frostworm's Fury you have a lot of burst. So Frost does have a place in the raid. Utility is good, mobility is whatever it's needed. It's kind of nice. You have Wraith Walk, maybe not, and you also have Death's Advance and so on and so forth. Not the most mobile classes, but can get away moving from A to B every now and again.
But okay, let's talk about another S tier bad boy, because we speculated this back in the day when we were doing this. Fury Warrior.
It's kind of, you know, like a broken record right now, but the fact remains that Fury scales always a little bit better than Arms. The main reason why Fury was low at the beginning of the raid tier was because single target Fury was supposed to be Venthyr, more or less, and Venthyr kind of really wants execute, and Sylvanas doesn't have an execute phase, so that was a little bit awkward. But right now, Fury is kicking it really hard in the Nards, is doing a lot of damage, and it's very high up there with Assassination. It's hard to differentiate the two, because
this is the thing. Assassination will take the cake on pure single target and miles away in front of Fury, while Fury will definitely take the cake on cleave and AoE from Assassination. So this is the thing, right? It's hard to balance between, because both of these specs have different profiles, but they're both S tier. So that being said, another smooth, I would say, spec coming up, Mr. Demon Hunter, Havoc.
This one was also kind of hard to place, because it could just as well be S tier, but I thought there was a clear difference between S tier and the way Havoc was performing. It's not that it's a bad spec, it could just be as well as S tier. Let's say if S tier wouldn't exist, then all the specs that are in S tier would be on the same level as Havoc. Havoc is right now, I would say, the top of the A tier, is doing really good.
In front of Arms.
If I'm not mistaken as well, Havoc plays with the Frost set, which is similar to Assassination, and obviously you would need a lot of crit for for it. And since you have a lot of crit right now with the best of the best gear in the game after, 6-7 months of the patch being live, then you would probably, kick real hard ass as Havoc.
Okay, now a big surprise on this tier list is actually the Outlaw Rogue.
Yes.
Because when we first started the melee tier list for the raid, it was pretty low actually, and it was kind of underperforming. But as people got more gear, and as we are currently here with all decked out, I see a lot of Outlaw play the
I was
Frost.
super surprised.
The Frost shard apparently, the Frost set apparently is a really big impact. It has a really big impact on all of these rogue specs.
Did you say it's carrying some specs in the raid?
Not necessarily. No, I wouldn't go as far, but it's definitely some huge player power and huge power spike over there. And I wasn't expecting this. Now we all know Outlaw can do amazingly well in terms of like cleave and AOE, but now you can also see it doing very, very good in pure single target. Like you can see it really good on Guardian. You can see it really good on what's another like solo boss, Phase 3 Sylvanas as well. So I would say biggest surprise for me at least of this tier list for the raid is Outlaw being S tier.
It's actually doing a little bit better than
even better than Fury.
Well.
Yes. I'm sorry. I mean, I would argue that Outlaw's cleave in the raid is much stronger than Fury's, at least at this level.
Fury is also pretty known for its single target and consistent damage flow, and obviously Outlaw is similar because you kind of constantly reduce the cooldowns of your cooldowns, right?
Yeah.
Through by just playing more, and that kind of playstyle incentivizes a lot better scaling because you obviously get more gear, more haste. You reduce the cooldowns even more. You have them often. You have them up more often, so that really helps overall.
Next up, the Red Paladin, another example of a spec that can definitely do well on single target bosses, can do well on AoE calculated bosses, not so much in cleave. It's up there with the Ferals, the Frost Decays. I would say it's like the top out of these boys because you cannot really match their burst. Like when they burst, that wings and final reckoning and execution sentence, and
probably Boomy's the only spec that can rival and outtake that, and that's a little bit on the stupid side. But Red has always had a lot of burst, and obviously the utility is really good if you have a paladin, sacrifice, and all of that is really,
off heals,
really awesome.
Dispels and all that freedoms. There's definitely the utility, and it's a fun spec to play. Okay, I'm just gonna add that over there, and another fun spec to play, believe it or not, is a Subtlety Rogue, and Subtlety has retained its position in S tier. I mean, we all knew, like, in all the tier lists we did on this season, Subtlety was super performing. Now, we kind of always knew that Sub will do good in single target. We kind of expected with the buffs in 9.1 for Sub to do really good in AoE. The only place where Sub is really weak is cleave fights. The 9 fight is a hellhole for Subtlety, but when you have specs like Assassination, Outlaw, or Fury, they're gonna take the cake. And there's not as many situations where you find super solo single target damage for Sub. Usually there's some sort of like padding, cleaving going around, and this is where Sub kind of falling off a little bit.
Like if we look at the way that they designed raids lately, you have like one patchworky type boss, like we had Sludge Fist last year, and now we have Guardian. There are certain bosses where single target is preferred. We could think about it at Painsmith, for instance. Once you have a lot of like passive AoE damage, you don't really care about how good your AoE is, you just burst it into the boss. So that's probably why specs like Sub are still at the top.
Yeah, definitely. But speaking of fun specs to play, how about Survival, buddy boy?
Oh, god damn it. So Survival is definitely a very fun spec to play, and during Progress it was, I would say, a little bit more fun because you just had a lot more builds to play with. Because of the restrictions of the Covenant, you couldn't really expect like jump back and forth too much, so you had to pick one, and that just didn't enable the best builds possible, and you had to pick the next best thing, and the next best thing was very different. You had the trap build, essentially, but right now, the best single target performance that I've seen Survival do was about with Venthyr, with the the Flayed Shot, which is actually kind of cool. It brings you a different type of profile. Although Kyrian with the bombs build is still probably the best right now overall, but overall survival is just not there. It suffered a lot. It seems like it's in kind of a similar but worse situation like Havoc was back in BFA, where it does really good AoE, but when it comes to like pure single target, the flaws of the spec can obviously be seen, and it's all the way down to C tier. Unfortunately, it's not as bad as Enhancement, although on certain fights Enhancement can take survival. So we'll see exactly what happens in 9-2, but right now survival needs a lot of single target love. That's all I gotta say.
Okay. What about Unholy DK? This was a big surprise for me as well. Unholy DK was doing super good in Castle Natria. Looking at what's been doing it now, how has it been doing it now?
I think it's just a problem of scaling, like we had with the boys when we talked about the spec during our podcast.
Yeah.
It's just not scaling that well with a lot of gear and all of the conduits as well. It's in C tier as well, which is a little bit weird, but that could probably be to the fact that Frost is a little bit better than Unholy, and Unholy is actually performing very, very poorly. And I'm looking forward to see what they're doing in 9.2, but right now it took a big dive.
I was always thinking that in that tier where we have like Red, Frost, and Feral, I was thinking that out of that bunch, Frost will be the biggest cleave boy out of all those three, and not as much as single target burst. Seeing it above Unholy DK
Frost
makes you think, like, wasn't Unholy better for cleave and AoE and stuff?
The thing is, Unholy is better for AoE normally, because the only realistic good AoE that Frost has is either through its Rhyme procs, which are like and also through the Breath of Sindragosa maintenance. But realistically, the Breath of Sindragosa is not gonna be up for like as much as you like, or that on demand, while Unholy is. Frost just has very consistent single target. Now that everybody's getting used to the fight, you can stick to the boss easier, so the downsides of Breath are less impactful than they would be normally on progression, where Unholy would probably shine a little bit more. It could be just because this is how the gear is, how the covenants are, and how everything is balanced once you really look at it.
Okay. Now the last one on the charts here, which is like the M plus God, but on the raid.
So it's obviously one of the best melee specs in the dungeon, and
Windwalker.
It had suffered from the it has no single target issue for a while, and still far right now it's up there in A tier. It's a little bit above Arms, which that was a little bit surprising. So that just goes to show that as opposed to something like Unholy, Windwalker is scaling really well with the gear and everything that it has right now. Obviously, they received a couple of buffs to the single target, and it shows right now. It's one of the top specs there. It's really good.
Yeah, this is the thing. Windwalker was always known in terms of like raid progression, was always known for the pick for AoE. I only think about the what's it called, the
Rising Sun Kick.
No, not Rising Sun. The boss, Rasnal. What was it?
Smith?
Not Painsmith.
Soul Render.
Soul Render, man.
Right,
Soul Render, yeah. Because I know in our guild we have a Windwalker monk who is specifically designated on Soul Render to, like, when the DK is pulling the cleave, he goes with this big ass AoE. So we know.
Yeah, that's
we
really good.
We know Windwalkers were really good for that. It's very surprising to see them on an A tier, given the fact that traditionally they weren't as good for single target.
Well, not anymore apparently.
Yeah, really, really good. But in terms of like what has been happening on the raiding scene with melees, this is kind of it. Now, in the terms of like where we took the data from this and what we looked at, it's Raider.io, it's 95 percentile, it's
Warcraft log, sub creation, all of that. We kind of cross-reference a bunch of them and try to see exactly where the most common ground is.
Yeah, and also we have to mention this. Obviously you're gonna have specs and logs where 10 PIs are in there, and I don't know, kindred spirits or any cheat. The cheese is going to be there, but that's how the game is played at that level at this point. So if people just want to like play for parses and cheese for parses,
the
that's
thing is,
fine.
if everybody plays for parses and gets the cheese, then kind of the playing field is a little bit leveled at the top.
Yeah. And with that note, we do want to express our a bit apologies for the voices we have. We are a little bit, I would say, ill, feverish and all of that. Nothing too worrisome, but I think it's shown.
We're a little bit on the low, which is part of the reason why we didn't have this live, because we did want to make this live.
It live, but we couldn't do it.
But we will do it next week and we'll definitely let everybody know through our social media platforms as well. We do want to do a TLF live with you guys while we chat and debate and look at exactly what happens within the meta, and you guys will see exactly what that's all about. But that's gonna be on Thursday,
next Thursday,
on our twitch.tv/MarcelianOnline. If you haven't been on stream it, you can go check it out. We do other streams as well about, you know, keys, raids, and all of that stuff. But you can also check out the live TLF next Thursday.
Yeah, boy. And also you can check out the Patreons, because the Patreons are the ones who make all of this possible. The brain is not working at its full capacity, but the heart still is. And you know, Patreons, you're all in our heart. Thank you so much for our hearts. Thank you so much for all of the support. Yes, and the fact that there's still people joining in the Patreon team and people are still like recurrently being there, it really means a lot to us. Just as a reminder, you're supporting like the class guides, the TLF shows, the podcasts, the streams, even the On Cooldown news series, which kind of changed its format a little bit. It is news when it's newsworthy, but if it's not news, it's basically something we like to talk about. Like this week we had with the
the classes that can be added in 10.0.
Yeah.
And we're gonna have more topics like this in the future.
So definitely thank you for supporting all of this content, plus more to come. Hopefully we get better and we get that full energy going. And with that being said, say something.
Thank you very much for watching the video, and we'll see you next time.
Bye.
I've been loving it then, I still love it now. Still, I play WoW. Still, I play WoW. Getting better every day, let me show you how. Cause still, I play WoW. Still, I play WoW. It's getting harder to stay, but at the end of the day, it's a guilty pleasure, so just log in and play. Whether it's classic or retail, I'ma do a /bow. Still, I play WoW.